If you want to permanently house someone who has been, chronically homeless for half a decade, traditional logic says you need to fix their underlying problems first.
Right, like you have to cure everything before they get a home.
Exactly. You need to cure their addictions, stabilize their mental illness, get them completely sober, and then, only when they've proven they can follow all the rules, you reward them with the keys to an apartment.
Which sounds completely reasonable to most people.
It does. But what if the hard data proves that approach is actually entirely backwards? What if demanding perfection is the very thing keeping people on the street? Welcome to the deep dive.
Because we are looking at a system today that is just fundamentally broken. And, I mean, it is costing an absolute fortune while completely failing the most vulnerable people in our society.
Yeah, so we were unpacking a single really fascinating source today that tackles this exact issue. It's the September 2012 At-Home Ches Soy Interim Report.
Produced by the Mental Health Commission of Canada.
Right. And if you are someone who loves to see how data can challenge our deepest assumptions and how a completely counterintuitive idea can flip a failing system on its head, you are going to find this incredibly compelling.
And it is worth emphasizing right away that we aren't talking about, like, a small, localized survey with a few dozen people.
Oh, not at all.
This report documents the largest study of its kind ever conducted anywhere in the world.
To really grasp the gravity of this, put yourself in the shoes of a taxpayer or, I don't know, a city planner for a moment. According to the report, there are an estimated 150,000 to 300,000 homeless Canadians.
That is a massive demographic.
It's huge, and the financial toll of this is staggering. We are talking about around $1.4 billion every single year.
And the crazy part is that money isn't even solving the problem.
No, not at all. It is funding this brutal revolving door. People are bouncing from emergency shelters to acute hospital psychiatric wards, into the back of police cruisers, and then right back out onto the street.
Because it's crisis management rather than actual treatment. The system essentially waits until an individual is in acute distress, then dispatches the most expensive emergency resources available, like an ambulance or a hospital bed.
Which cost a fortune.
Exactly. And then they discharge them back into the exact same environment that caused the crisis in the first place. It is just economically unsustainable.
So, to understand how this report proposes fixing that $1.4 billion revolving door, we have to look at the baseline. The standard approach being used across most cities, which the report labels treatment as usual.
Yeah, under treatment as usual, permanent housing is basically treated as the ultimate prize.
Like a reward for good behavior?
Exactly. A person experiencing chronic homelessness is expected to navigate this absolute maze of transitional steps. They might start on a shelter mat, then maybe move to a group home, and maybe eventually get their own place.
But moving up that ladder requires total compliance.
Right. They have to prove they are housing ready, usually by participating in mandated psychiatric treatment or maintaining absolute sobriety.
Which means you essentially have to earn your fundamental right to shelter by conquering your deepest, darkest traumas while sleeping in a noisy, crowded shelter, or literally in an alleyway.
And if you relapse, or, if you refuse a specific medication because of severe side effects, you risk losing your spot in that transitional housing.
You are kicked right back down to the bottom of the ladder.
Exactly.
Which brings us to the radical paradigm shift at the center of this report. It's a model called Housing First.
Right, which started gaining traction in places like New York City and Toronto.
And it completely obliterates that transitional ladder. Under Housing First, participants are given immediate access to permanent independent housing through rent subsidies. They pay up to 30% of their income toward their rent, and they get their own apartment.
And the defining feature is that there are no strings attached regarding sobriety or treatment engagement. Getting the apartment is not contingent on proving you are fixed.
Okay, let's unpack this. Wait. We are talking about giving someone with, say, a severe substance dependency and a severe mental illness a private apartment with zero conditions.
That is correct.
No mandated sobriety, no requirement that they even take their psychiatric medication. I mean, I can hear the pushback from here.
Oh, absolutely.
On paper, that sounds incredibly risky to a lot of taxpayers. It sounds like we are just moving the chaos from the street indoors. How does that actually work in practice without the whole thing just falling apart?
What's fascinating here is that the lack of conditions does not mean a lack of support. It is actually quite the opposite. Housing First is built on a highly structured framework.
Okay, walk me through that.
So the first pillar is choice. These aren't institutional wards or massive segregated government buildings. They use scattered site, private market units.
Meaning they just live in regular apartment buildings.
Exactly. And the individual gets a say in what neighborhood they live in, which restores this crucial sense of autonomy that the shelter system usually completely strips away.
But if they are out in private apartments spread all over the city, how are they getting help?
That leads to the second pillar, which is individualized wraparound support services. The moment they get those keys, they also get immediate access to a really robust team of health and social workers.
But it's optional, right?
The services are voluntary, yes,
Mm-hmm.
but the teams are incredibly persistent and proactive.
I see. So the help is basically always knocking at the door, but it isn't holding the lease hostage.
Precisely. Which ties directly into the third pillar, which is harm reduction.
Right.
Instead of demanding sudden absolute abstinence, which, we know rarely works for severe long-term addiction,
Mm-hmm.
the program aims to reduce the negative consequences of substance use.
So what does that look like day to day?
Well, the staff might work with a participant to switch from a dangerous street drug to a safer prescribed alternative, or simply ensure they are drinking safely in their own home rather than passing out in a freezing park. The overarching philosophy is that a stable, warm bed is a fundamental medical necessity. You need that foundation before you can effectively treat anything else.
That really reframes the entire timeline of recovery. But, a theoretical framework is one thing. To really grasp the sheer difficulty of what this study attempted, we have to look closely at the people who actually enrolled in it.
Yes, the participants.
Because these weren't individuals who just had a bad month and missed rent.
Not at all. The scope of the At-Home Ches Soy project was a massive logistical feat. They ran a randomized controlled trial across 5 major Canadian cities.
Right. Vancouver, Winnipeg, Toronto, Montreal, and Moncton.
Yeah, and they enrolled a total of 2,255 participants. They were intentionally testing this model in completely different urban landscapes and housing markets to see if it held up.
And the baseline reality for those 2,255 people is just sobering. Let's break down who the typical participant actually is, because it really highlights why that old treatment as usual ladder was failing them.
Go for it.
The average participant in this study is around 41 years old, and they have been continuously homeless for almost 5 years.
5 years without a door to lock behind you.
That's just unimaginable.
The sheer physical and psychological exhaustion of living in a state of hypervigilance for half a decade, it fundamentally alters a person's nervous system.
And add extreme poverty to that exhaustion. Their average income is less than $685 a month.
Wow.
Yeah, 93% of them are entirely unemployed, and over half didn't even finish high school. But the statistic that really underscores the severity of this trial is the mental health data. 100% of the participants have a serious mental illness.
100%.
It was literally a baseline requirement just to get into the study.
And we need to be specific about what serious mental illness means in this context. The report details that 52% suffer from major depression.
Over half.
Yeah, and 35% have a psychotic disorder, meaning they might experience delusions or hallucinations on a regular basis. Another 29% are battling post-traumatic stress disorder.
It's heavy.
Very heavy. And on top of that psychiatric load, over 90% are managing at least one chronic physical health condition.
It's like trying to teach someone to cook a gourmet meal while they're actively drowning.
That's a great way to put it.
How can we reasonably expect a person experiencing active psychosis or battling devastating trauma to flawlessly navigate a maze of clinic appointments and rigid shelter rules when they don't even know if they will survive the cold that night?
You can't. You just can't. The cognitive load of simple survival consumes all their energy.
Yeah.
And it's also vital to note that this study didn't just cherry-pick the easiest cases. They intentionally ensured diverse representation to reflect the actual complex face of chronic homelessness.
Like the gender breakdown.
Right. 32% of the participants are women,
Hmm.
who often face unique and horrific dangers on the street. And 4% are military veterans.
The report also highlights that 22% of the overall participants are Aboriginal. And in Winnipeg specifically, they designed the study so that 70% of the participants were from the Aboriginal community.
Which is so important for that specific region.
It is, and that involved integrating cultural awareness and traditional healing practices into the actual support models.
Because the researchers wanted to prove that Housing First could adapt to different cultural contexts and incredibly complex individual traumas. They wanted to show it wasn't just a clinical theory, but a real human solution.
There is a fantastic anecdote in the report that takes all these massive, heavy statistics and kind of distills them into a single human reality.
Yep.
They talk about a participant they refer to as Jay.
Oh yeah, Jay's story.
Before entering the project, Jay described his life as being trapped in a vicious cycle. He had absolutely no support system. He was drinking heavily, living on the street, and just constantly racking up criminal charges.
The classic $1.4 billion revolving door in action right there.
Yeah.
Police intervention, temporary holding, release back to the street, and repeat.
Exactly. But the report details what happened after Jay was given an apartment through the At-Home Ches Soy project. The cycle just stopped. He stayed sober for over a year, but he didn't just stop drinking. He actually started building a life. He worked with the project staff to manage his very limited money, and he saved up to buy specific furniture he wanted for his place.
It gave him a sense of ownership.
It really did. He then signed up for a 32-week carpentry school. There's a direct quote from Jay where he says, "I have this time to keep going in the same direction. I'm trying to build on all my successes in the project."
Giving him an apartment gave him the mental bandwidth to think about the future, rather than just surviving the next 12 hours.
It is a beautiful outcome, but, it brings up a major logistical hurdle for me.
Okay, what's that?
A free apartment didn't cure Jay's addiction by magic. 4 walls and a roof don't spontaneously treat major depression or manage a psychotic episode. So if these folks are living alone in scattered apartments across the city, how is the support actually delivered? What does this look like on the ground?
This is where the brilliant mechanics of the intervention come into play.
Mm.
The project didn't just hand out keys and walk away. They divided the participants into 2 different tiers of care based on how intense their daily needs were.
Wait, what does that actually look like? If I am a participant with incredibly severe challenges, like maybe I have untreated schizophrenia and severe physical health issues, what kind of team am I getting?
So for individuals with the highest needs, the project utilized Assertive Community Treatment, or ACT teams.
ACT teams, got it.
And this isn't just a counselor you see once a month. This is a multidisciplinary team that might include a psychiatrist, a nurse, a social worker, and a peer support specialist.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they operate with a staff-to-client ratio of 1 to 10, and they are available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Wait, 247. So if a participant is having a mental health crisis at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday, they aren't calling 911 and waiting for an armed police response.
No, they or their landlord can call the ACT team.
Yeah.
And that team already knows the individual's history, their medications, and their specific triggers. The care comes directly to the participant's apartment.
That's incredible.
It functions almost like a psychiatric hospital without walls.
That is an incredible amount of dedicated infrastructure. But I imagine running a 247 team with a 1 to 10 ratio is incredibly expensive. Did they have a lighter version for folks who just need, moderate help but not round-the-clock crisis management?
They did. For individuals with moderate needs, the project used intensive case management, or ICM teams.
Okay, ICM.
These teams operate about 12 hours a day, with a staff-to-client ratio closer to 1 to 15 or 16. Their focus is more on connecting the participant with existing community resources.
So more like traditional social work.
Yeah, helping them navigate the welfare system, get to doctor's appointments, or maybe find a volunteer gig.
Let me ask a highly pragmatic question on behalf of the listener, because there is one piece of this puzzle that just seems impossible to me. We mentioned earlier that this program relies on private market units.
Right, scattered site.
They are renting from everyday landlords. How on earth do the organizers convince a private property manager to sign a lease with an individual who has a 5-year street history, 0 employment, and a documented severe mental illness? Because, landlords usually want a pristine credit score and 3 glowing references.
Right. It is arguably the most clever mechanical aspect of the entire Housing First model. Over 260 private landlords and property managers actually agreed to participate in this project.
260.
Yeah. And they didn't do it just out of the goodness of their hearts. They did it because the ACT and ICM teams completely neutralized their financial and operational risk.
Oh, I see. The landlord knows the rent subsidy is guaranteed by the program, so the money is safe.
The money is perfectly safe, and the behavioral risk is managed. The landlords were given a direct emergency line to those professional support teams.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
Right. So if a tenant is acting erratically in the hallway, or maybe hoarding or missing rent, the landlord doesn't have to navigate a grueling, expensive eviction process. They just call the support team, who intervenes immediately.
So they aren't just taking a gamble on a vulnerable person. They are entering a partnership with a massive medical and social support network.
Exactly. And the report captures this perfectly, with a direct quote from one of the participating landlords.
What did they say?
They said, if anything, they're being looked after better than regular tenants because there's all that team behind them. It completely flipped the landlord's perception of risk.
Wow. So we have the intervention defined, we know how incredibly vulnerable the participants are, and we see how the support teams and private landlords actually function together.
Yep, the pieces are all there.
But a happy landlord and a well-intentioned 24/7 support team don't automatically guarantee that someone won't end up right back on the street. So when the researchers actually looked at the data after a full year, did these folks stay in their apartments?
The housing stability outcomes are the foundational metric of the entire report. They track the individuals receiving the Housing First intervention and compare them directly against the control group, who are still navigating the traditional treatment as usual system.
The folks still trying to earn their way up that transitional shelter ladder.
Exactly. After 12 months, the data provides a glaring contrast. The individuals in the treatment as usual group spent only 30% of their time in stable housing.
Only 30%.
The other 70% of their entire year was spent in chaos, just bouncing between temporary shelters, sleeping outside, or institutionalized.
So even with the traditional system actively trying to help them, the vast majority of their lives remained totally unstable.
Now look at the Housing First group. After 12 months, those individuals spent 73% of their time in stable, permanent housing.
That is a massive jump.
It is. Furthermore, nearly 86% of the individuals who were housed remained in their very first or second unit. The model didn't just pull them off the street. It firmly anchored them in a community.
That is a staggering operational victory. But as we established at the very top of the deep dive, this isn't solely a conversation about empathy, right?
Right. It's about the numbers.
It is a question of cold, hard economics. Chronic homelessness is a $1.4 billion drain on the public purse. We are already spending a fortune managing the crisis poorly. So how does the financial math of Housing First actually shake out?
This is the data that policymakers desperately need to see. The researchers meticulously tracked the costs of emergency shelters, hospital visits, police detentions, and justice services for everyone in the study.
Okay, lay it on me.
For the total sample of participants in the treatment as usual control group, society was spending an average of $23,849 per person every single year just to manage their repeated crises while they remained homeless.
$23,849 per person, largely swallowed up by ambulance rides, ER beds, and jail cells, I'm assuming.
Precisely. Now let's look at the Housing First group.
Yeah.
Because these individuals were stabilized in their own apartments and receiving proactive care from the ACT and ICM teams, their reliance on those external emergency services just plummeted.
How much?
Their external crisis costs dropped to $14,599 per year.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Because that drop in external emergency costs acts as a massive financial offset for the program itself, doesn't it?
Exactly.
Running the Housing First program, like paying the private market rent subsidies and funding those intensive 20 and 47 support teams, that costs about $17,160 per person. But because the program automatically saved the system over $9,200 in emergency costs, the net cost to society to house and treat these individuals is only an additional $7,910 per year.
Yeah, to put that in simpler terms, for every single dollar the government spent on the Housing First program for the general participant, 54 cents was immediately saved by reductions elsewhere in the system.
You are getting a 54% discount on an intervention that literally saves lives and gets people off the sidewalk.
It's an incredible return on investment.
But the data reveals something even more dramatic when we isolate a specific group of participants, right?
Oh, absolutely. If we connect this to the bigger picture, we really have to talk about the high service users. The report isolated the top 10% of participants who, prior to the study, were utilizing the absolute highest volume of emergency services.
So these are the folks who are almost universally known by first name in the local emergency rooms or by the downtown police precinct because they are just in a perpetual state of severe public crisis.
Yeah, the hardest of the hard cases. For that specific top 10%, the traditional treatment as usual costs were astronomical. Society was spending a staggering $56,431 per person per year with virtually no positive outcome.
$56,000.
But when those high service users were placed into the Housing First program, Their external crisis costs plummeted to $30,216.
That is a drop of over $26,000 in emergency service usage per person.
Yes. And remember, the Housing First program for these high users costs about $16,825 to operate. Because the drop in ER visits and police interactions is so overwhelmingly massive, the program actually surpasses paying for itself.
Wait, it makes money.
It generates capital. For the high service users, Housing First results in a net savings of $9,390 per person every single year.
A net savings of almost $10,000. So for every dollar spent on Housing First for these high users, the taxpayer saves $1.54.
That's the math.
It's basically like paying exorbitant daily rental fees for a broken-down, unreliable car that keeps leaving you stranded. Then someone suggests buying a brand new hybrid. The upfront price of the hybrid feels steep, but when you eliminate the daily rental phase, the constant towing costs, and the terrible gas mileage, you realize you are actually making money in the long run. We are literally bleeding public funds by keeping the most vulnerable people unhoused.
It is a profound piece of data. It suggests that cities shouldn't just offer Housing First to whoever happens to walk through the door. They should actively use prior service data to define their recruitment targets.
Oh, be strategic about it.
Exactly. If a municipality wants to maximize its economic efficiency, they can intentionally identify the individuals who are currently costing the emergency system the most money and proactively offer them an apartment and an ACT team.
So what does this all mean? When we zoom out and look at the sheer scale of the At Home Just Soy project, what is the ultimate takeaway for the listener?
The overarching synthesis is that attempting to manage chronic homelessness and severe mental illness through emergency room triage and police intervention is just a monumental failure of logic.
Yeah.
It is wildly inefficient. By shifting the paradigm, by providing permanent housing as the baseline foundation and delivering proactive care directly into the community, society fundamentally reclaims its emergency resources.
Which benefits everyone.
Right. ER beds are freed up for acute medical emergencies. Police officers can return to actual public safety work. And cities cultivate safer, more stable environments. The data unequivocally proves that the humane, dignified choice is also the most fiscally responsible choice.
It fundamentally rewrites the rulebook. And, it leaves you with a final thought to mull over, one that stretches this logic even further.
Where does it go next?
Well, this entire report forces us to view housing not merely as a real estate commodity, but as a critical social determinant of health. For these participants, a stable apartment was essentially a highly effective, cost-saving medical prescription.
It was medicine.
Exactly. So how should this reshape our approach to the millions of people who aren't on the street yet, but are precariously housed?
Right. The family's paying 60% of their income to a landlord, just constantly one unexpected medical bill away from eviction.
Exactly. If we know with absolute certainty that falling into homelessness creates a massive long-term financial burden on our hospitals and justice systems, what if we started prescribing rent subsidies the way a cardiologist prescribes preventative medication before a patient has a massive heart attack?
Oh, wow. That's a huge shift in perspective.
If we treated a looming eviction as a medical emergency and just kept people anchored in their homes, how drastically could we shrink our national healthcare budgets decades down the line?
It challenges us to completely redefine where the boundaries of healthcare actually begin and end.
It really does. We can't solve a systemic crisis by just staring at the broken pieces in isolation. We have to look at how the entire machine is built. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. Keep questioning the status quo, keep looking for the data that challenges your assumptions, and we will catch you next time.